Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue think they slate, dropping unrealistic mad 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the milli, never hear me preach, slip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through to early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals to fill the day. Good morning, folks. It is Tuesday, but we're 2 minutes away from noon. And the reason for the change this week is because I've been noticing a trend that usually when I start, views start to come in at a higher frequency around 12:30. So this is an experiment. We're going to try to start around noon, see if that boosts the overall views throughout the entire show. Now, we don't know if this is going to be an every week thing or if this is going to be just for this week. I'll let you guys know on that. But this is going to be a loaded show because we got a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, we had several losses in the sports world. I put together a little video complication paying tribute to them, a little picture tribute, which I'll put on the screen in a minute. We had some breaking news yesterday. One of the head coaches getting fired in the NFL. I'll talk about that. We also had some breaking news in the NBA world of a general manager getting fired. Some of you guys probably already know who it is, but for those of you that don't, stay tuned. We'll talk about that in 1 minute. But before we get started on that, we want to say to anyone who is a veteran or has family members that are veterans, happy Veterans Day. That's the reason for the camouflage screen color to start this one off. So that's the background reason for that background color there, being that today is Veterans Day. So happy Veterans Day. It being that this is a Veterans Day where a lot of veterans might be having to line up to get food because their SNAP benefits, they're not receiving it. If you're a local, if you have the opportunity, if you have a neighbor or someone that's a veteran, you have the opportunity to supply them with food, especially veteran in need, do so on this Veterans Day to give back to them. So with that being said, we got Eric Phillips, one of my main friends in the chat here. Eric, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. So without any further ado, we're going to start this thing off like I usually do. We're going to do it with the rant of the week. Now, this could have been either about the Dallas Mavericks or the New York Giants, but I decided to go on a slightly different note because I've been noticing something. I was listening yesterday to the CBS Sports Sunday recap, which is where I listen to what they have to say, catch up on some of the games I didn't get to watch. And I noticed they were talking about the MVP discussion. They were talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Arizona Cardinals, discussing Sam Darnold as a possible MVP candidate, which I'm not entirely against that. However, I noticed while discussing it, the idea that Sam Darnold could be an MVP frontrunner was brought up. However, when they discussed Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts, who had 3 touchdowns that overseas Colts win in overtime against the Falcons, they acknowledged his 3 touchdowns, but the possibility of Jonathan Taylor being the MVP didn't come up. And that's what ties into this right here. A lot of times, usually I feel like the quarterback gets the MVP. Now, part because it's the most important position on the field, but another reason why is because they're the most marketable. It's the most marketable position in the league. But while the quarterback a lot of times can be the MVP, that may not always be the case 100% of the time. And when we look at this season in particular, Jonathan Taylor has truly been the most valuable player. When you look at the Colts, look at what they did last week in the loss versus the Steelers, where they didn't use Jonathan Taylor as much versus when they use him frequently. You see it's a huge difference. And while Daniel Jones has played good at times, the real face of that offense has been Jonathan Taylor by far. When he's on, the Colts offense is practically unstoppable, and they win games with him being the focal point of that offense. So when I think of the true most valuable player, I got to go this case with Jonathan Taylor. And remember, there have been instances in the past where running backs have been the MVP. Remember, Adrian Peterson in 2012 got the MVP when he pretty much carried the Minnesota Vikings to a 10-win season, primarily as the main guy on offense. When you had Christian Ponder as the quarterback who ultimately didn't pan out in the long haul, Adrian Peterson carried that team. You remember 2006 when Phillip Rivers, first year as a starter for the Chargers, he took him a year to get going. LaDainian Tomlinson led the way, broke the single-season touchdown record. The year before that, it was Shaun Alexander for the Seattle Seahawks, who initially broke the record the year before LaDainian Tomlinson broke it. So sometimes it's the running backs who are the MVPs too. Sometimes even it could be a defensive player. Like you remember the year the Baltimore Ravens won that first Super Bowl, who was, they won it with one of the greatest defenses. Who was probably the real MVP? Ray Lewis. So, hey, got Mitch stopping by in the chat. What is up, Mitch? One of my longtime supporters. Thanks for stopping in. So sometimes it's not always the quarterbacks that are the MVP. And in this case, no offense to Sam Darnold, no offense to Baker Mayfield, no offense to some of the quarterbacks who are balling out season, no offense to Josh Allen, but the real MVP is Jonathan Taylor so far for me this season. When you look at his play, look at how much of an impact he makes for the Colts, particularly on Sunday against the Falcons as just one example. When he scored 3 touchdowns, dominated. And if you look at Jonathan Taylor's game log for 1 second, I'm going to look at Jonathan Taylor's stats. We're going to go game by game. I'll share the screen with you guys in just 1 second when I have it set. And you guys will see my point. There you go. You see the Falcons, 32 carries, 244 yards, 3 touchdowns. Against the Titans, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns. The win against the Chargers, only 94 rushing yards, but he had 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns versus the Raiders. Had 3 the first go around against the Titans. Against the Broncos, the week 2 win, he had 165. You see Jonathan Taylor throughout most of their wins, even the Cardinals, 123 and a touchdown, has consistently gotten close to the 100-yard mark and had 1 or multiple touchdowns, or has hit over the 100-yard mark numerous times throughout the Indianapolis Colts victories. So with all due respect to Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce, and the players on the Colts, but I got Jonathan Taylor as the MVP, and I understand the quarterback's the most marketable position, but they aren't always the MVP, folks. So I'll leave it at that. Now we're going to switch gears while we're still on the subject of football. Let's talk about some of the news that came out yesterday real quick. I kind of touched up on this on my channel, but we're just going to go one more time. The New York Giants fired head coach Brian Daboll after a 2-8 start to the season. We saw the writing on the wall. Some of us even thought that from a non-biased point of view, the Giants should have got rid of Daboll. I even said this before in one of the earlier episodes of the 3-Point Blitz, backdooring free agency. I thought the Giants should have gotten rid of Daboll from an objective standpoint. Based off the last 2 seasons, yes, they had that 9-7-1 season. They made the playoffs. Daboll was the coach of the year. They won in the wild card round against the Vikings, lost to my team in the divisional round. But considering the Giants were fresh off being a dumpster fire and having 5 straight losing seasons, I believe it was, that was a worthy recognition. But look at what Daboll did since then. You're talking like 4-win seasons, 3-win seasons. This year to start 2-8, this was a well overdue firing. Brian Daboll, let's face it, was a one-hit wonder as far as the Giants coach goes. Now, I do feel like in part, I'm not solely blaming on Brian Daboll, because the New York Giants front office played a role in it too. They consistently failed to they consistently failed through the draft. They failed through free agency. Looking back on it now, the decision to keep Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley and give him that big contract instead of giving it to Saquon ultimately backfired in the long haul. So that's more on the front office. Look at some of the poor drafts they made. You could blame that part on the front office too. But Brian Daboll deserves some of the blame too. And look, he ultimately did deserve to get fired because his record was 20-40-1 as a head coach. That's like that 9-7 season never happened over the past 2.5 seasons. It's like his act wore, he had that one good first year, but his act wore thin. And ultimately, there's not much he could do once he got past that. So that's one thing the Giants needed to do. But from an organizational standpoint, any Giants fan listening to this would agree. They really got to make the key changes at the top, because that's where true changes come in sports. You could see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their original owner versus their current owner. Forget the original owner's name, but he was known as a cheapskate with contracts. He ultimately let a lot of players walk to him for agency, and it wasn't until they got a new owner that they started to turn around. And in that time since, they've won 2 Super Bowls and have been one of the better teams since the 90s in the NFL. So point being is sometimes the real changes come all the way at the top, and you have to give it time to trickle down to the bottom. So while Brian Daboll being fired is one step in that direction, it's not the only step the Giants need to take. They still got to address the GM rot. They got to address everything in the front office and start bringing in the right football minds. But now, Mike Kafka, some of you Eagles fans might remember him. He filled in for Michael Vick in 2011 for a little bit. He's now going to be the interim coach for the Giants, and they'll just have to see how that goes. But Brian Daboll, don't get me wrong, he did deserve some of the heat, but it's going to take more than that for the Giants to fix their issues. But moving right along, we got something a little more serious to discuss right now. Because unfortunately, we lost former NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, Seattle legend Lenny Wilkins from back in the old Seattle Supersonics days, and the Cowboys lost Marshawn Nimore. Now, this one, I'm going to have to stop on a serious note for a second. Talk about the Marshawn Nimore one first. we unfortunately, because I know some of you guys want me to talk sports, but we have to stop for just a second, talk about something a little more serious. In the Marshawn Nemore case, Marshawn Nemore was dealing with mental illness. He had a history of it. And unfortunately, too many men have taken their lives due to mental health issues. And it's something we got to just address real quickly. Look, we as men are taught to keep to ourselves, stay quiet, not express emotions. But we also as men need a place where we can express ourselves. And I bring this up because one of my friends who actually came into the chat at the beginning had a little panel discussion on Saturday that I attended where kind of creating like a safe space for men to discuss experiences they've been through, clear whatever issues they have off their chest. And thinking about being there, I realized, look, we as men, we got to do it better. We got to find a place. We need to have a bit of a support system for each other where we can talk to each other, talk about issues that are bothering us, whether it be relationship issues, family issues, issues at work, whatever else, financial stress. Because the longer you stick, the more you hold back on expressing yourself, the more likely it is to eat away at you. And that's something we as men need. We need a place that we can express ourselves and talk about it. Now, we don't know. I don't know particularly about Marshawn Nemore's case. I don't know if he had anyone or if he was trying to reach out because we only knew him as a football player. But it would definitely help for us as a whole as men to at least have a place we can express ourselves, have a support system to support us through difficult times. And that's something we as men should take more seriously. That's on the serious note. Now, as far as the three itself goes, Marshawn Nemore, it's a shame that we lost a young man before he ever had the opportunity to really excel at his craft because he was only in his second season. We never really got to truly see what this man could have done had he stuck around. What would Nemore have done? We'll never truly know, but it's a discussion we as men have to have more seriously. Rest in peace, Marshawn Nemore, as well as Lenny Wilkens, who's considered one of the Seattle Supersonics legends. We lost him over the weekend as well. Now let's talk about Lenny Wilkens for a second. Quickly go over it. He was all inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1989 as a player. He was a 9-time All-Star, 1971 All-Star Game MVP, part of the 50th and 75th NBA anniversary teams. As a coach, he won a championship with the 79 Sonics, which was their last championship in Seattle before they moved to Oklahoma City in 2008. They just recently won a chip as the Thunder with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leading the way. But long story short, Lenny Wilkens won a championship there. He also was the coach of the year in 1994, four-time All-NBA All-Star coach or four-time NBA All-Star squad coach, and retired with 1,332 regular season wins. And he coached the 1996 men's U.S. basketball team to a gold medal. So Lenny Wilkens had a decorated career as a player, as a coach, 9-time All-Star as a player, and an NBA champion as a coach, multi-time coach of the year, one of the best to do it. And we got Mitch, friendly reminder, tonight we got the NFL Pick'ems at 8 p.m. exclusively on the Hardcore Sports Network with me and Agent Warrior X. We'll be talking about Week 11, picking the games, and giving some hot takes for that later tonight at 8 p.m. So make sure to tune into that as well. And we also lost Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner of the NFL. For those of us that we grew up on Tagliabue. We remember him infamously announcing the Eli Manning picks, the Phillip Rivers picks, the swap and trade. Tagliabue was on our screen every year for the draft before Roger Goodell took over until 2006. So rest in peace to the former commissioner, Paul Tagliabue. He was one of the key guys from when the NFL draft became a big deal, became a big TV sensation. He played a role in it along as the guy announced the picks alongside Mel Kiper as an analyst. The rest in peace, Paul Tagliabue. Before we move on, I put together a little picture tribute of the three that recently passed. And then after that, we'll move on and discuss the NFL Week 10. So rest in peace to the three men. And best condolences to their families. Now, with that being said, we're going to move on now, talk about the NFL Week 10. We're going to start off with the Thursday night matchup. In this case, it was the Denver Broncos beating the Las Vegas Raiders. The Broncos moved on to 8-2 for the season, which is an incredible feat. But on the other hand, I got to say, this was not the most fun game in the world. Wait, now that I think about it, it's crazy. We had two primetime games finish with a final score of 10-7. And we had two 4 o'clock games on Sunday finish with a score of 44-22. We'll start off with this. Out of the two primetime games, this was not the least exciting of the two 10-7 final scores. And some of you are thinking, oh, you're just saying that because your team won. It's not even that necessarily. I mean, it did obviously help as an Eagles fan. I was more invested in my team's game than the Thursday night game. But even then, it's like the main difference is the Eagles-Packers was mainly a defensive battle. Two good defenses giving it their all. One team had to win, the other had to lose. In this game between the Raiders and Broncos, you're talking about a Raiders team who has been a poor team all season long, and you had Bo Nix throwing 2 picks. I mean, you had J.K. Dobbins did decent, but there you had no points in the fourth quarter, which is ironic because the Denver Broncos are known for playing their best football in the fourth quarter. It's what they did in the upset against the Eagles. It's what they did against the Giants when they came back. In this case, this was just a really boring offensive game. You had 2 interceptions thrown by Nix against the Raiders, which that's not an impressive individual performance. And what credit to the Denver Broncos, though, as a team for winning this game. But at the same time, I was not impressed. I wasn't impressed with Bo Nix because of the situation he was in. He was in a situation where you're going against a struggling Raiders team, the same Broncos that, mind you, destroyed the Dallas Cowboys defense. The same Denver Broncos that came back in the fourth quarter against the Giants, down double digits, and came back against the Eagles down 17-3, only got 10 points against the Raiders. I mean, you can't always win them pretty, but in this game, it just felt like one of those games that congratulations to the Broncos on winning, but Bo Nix, you can't repeat that performance, man. You're not going to get as lucky next time to win. I mean, don't get me wrong, take the victory while you have it. You got the win. Be happy with that, but don't expect the same luck with this similar type of performance going forward. That's all I'm going to say there. And to the Raiders, Geno Smith didn't look better good at all. I mean, just did not see any semblance of good quarterback play in this game at all. And Geno's going to get benched now. I guess Kenny Pickett's going to take over as the starter, which I think the Raiders got bigger issues than quarterback now, too, as a team. But so far with the Raiders, look, the best semblance of offense I've seen is Ashton Genty. And he did all right in this game, 60 yards and 19 carries, but just as a whole, they did not look like a good team in this one. So it's just, I'm just kind of glad this game's over with. Congrats to the Broncos on your win. I think everyone else is just ready to move on. Are these games more bad offensive play or better defensive games? I love ugly defensive games and hate high-scoring games. But, hey, I'm a former defensive lineman. Yep. Well, you had some bias there, too. But I felt like the Eagles game certainly last night had more – it was more of an offense. It was more of a good defensive game. Because I feel like the offenses actually did move the ball a little bit better. Jordan Love was trying to make some plays, but you also just had some really good defense by the Eagles secondary in that game too. So that felt like more of a good defensive game. You saw Saquon Barkley had himself a solid game, but the Packers defense did pretty good. Josh Jacobs had himself a solid game, but the Eagles were able to contain him just enough to keep him from being a true difference maker. But that Raiders-Broncos game, that wasn't that type of game for me. But moving right along, we go to the Colts-Falcons game. Now, we're starting off, say this. Credit to the Atlanta Falcons for being a competitive team, but they're not doing what they have to do to win games. That's the thing. At this point, I don't see the Falcons being able to get the job done this season. Yeah, they're being competitive, and they did have that upset over Buffalo, but at the same time, I think that's saying more about Buffalo, with all due respect to the Falcons, especially being they gave up an upset this week, which I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But in this one, though, credit to the Falcons. They made it a competitive game. There was a point they may have even had a chance of winning it, but Jonathan Taylor, like I said earlier, he pretty much carried the weight for this team. He had what? Yeah, like I said, he had 3 touchdowns. It was 244 yards. Jonathan Taylor had a great day in this one, like we elaborated earlier. And also Tyler Warren had himself a solid game, 8 receptions, 99 yards. You also had Alec Pierce caught 4 passes and got one of them for a touchdown. So that helped out too in the offense. It wasn't just Jonathan Taylor. I got to give credit to Warren and Pierce as well as Jonathan Taylor, like I already gave credit to. But ultimately, the Colts found a way to win, and that's what mattered most. It wasn't a pretty performance, but it was a win. They kind of struggled against the run stop. They struggled to stop Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Those guys went off for a combined over 150 yards. So they had a tough time stopping the run. And even Drake London had himself a really good game. It was a great day if you had Drake London in your fantasy. 6 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. So credit to both teams, but the Colts ultimately won. And they did what good teams do and find a way to win games. And Eric, the Eagles versus Packers was definitely a defensive game. Like Nick said, it says a lot when they usually score big numbers. Right, and Mitch said a win's a win. And for the Colts, man, hey, they did what they had to do. They went in against the team. That Falcons, they were playing for pride. They're not the best team in the world, but there's a reason they say any given Sunday, because sometimes the team may not be that good, could play hungry and play hard to try to beat you. And the Falcons did that against the Colts. They played hard. They came motivated to win. But the Colts found a way to get the job done. And then Coach points out there was questionable coaching decisions for Atlanta. To let the Colts fight back the way they did is indicative of poor coaching. They should have come away with a win versus Indy. And they weren't, right, and to Coach's point, they were in prime position to do so, but ultimately, as the late Dennis Green put it, would say, you let them off the hook. And that's kind of what happened here. So the Falcons, man, I think what Coach said brings up a great point, because the Falcons are that team that has a lot of good talent, but hasn't really coached well. You've been seeing it recently. And Raheem is on the hot seat. I hate it for a former Jersey high school star. And absolutely, and that's a great point, because the last couple of years we've seen this trend with the Falcons where they have talent. They, on paper, have a good team, but they just can't put it together. We saw it last year. They managed to sweep the Buccaneers, but they couldn't win enough games to win the division. And this year we're seeing games where they're competitive, but they can't close out. And at some point in time, the common denominator Raheem Moore's the common denominator both times. At some point, you got to look at them and think he's on the hot seat. Just like the team that blew this next game we're going to discuss. It was the Chicago Bears versus the New York Giants. Now, this ties into why the Giants fired Brian DeBall. Now, here was a winnable game, despite the fact you were 2-7. Despite the fact your opponent was 5-3, Giants had a good opportunity to win this game. They were in cruise control going into the fourth quarter, but ultimately they let the Bears come back. They couldn't close out, and ultimately that's what they get for not being able to close the deal. Because here you go, you had it. Going into the fourth quarter, you were up 17-10, then eventually, and you let them score 14 on Andy's points. And Caleb Williams had himself a pretty good comeback, but the Giants, man, let him off the hook. And I know, Coach, big game, low-key rooting for the Bears, right? Well, I don't know, Eric is a Cowboys fan, and obviously being that the Giants and Cowboys are rivals, obviously that plays a factor. But, man, on one hand, look, the Chicago Bears do deserve credit for finding a way to win this game. They didn't give up even when they were down. They took, Caleb Williams shine. We did it good enough to help shine at the end, lead a touchdown drive. DeAndre Swift, he only had 80 yards on 13 carries, but kind of similar to Saquon. While he didn't have the best overall stats, his work both on the ground and in the air did play a role in helping the Bears win this game. Because sometimes not always you don't have to have the flashiest stats to make a difference. Sometimes you just got to make the right plays and make enough plays to be a contributor. And that's the downside to fantasy football in the day and age of flashy stats is sometimes people look out more for the stats and the individual performances than necessarily making the right plays. Now, DeAndre Swift did do enough, and he made some of the right plays. Caleb Williams, again, now his stats, 220 yards, 1 touchdown, weren't the greatest in the world, but it's not about that. We saw some good throws from Caleb throughout the game. We saw a team that didn't give up. We see with Ben Johnson, the Chicago Bears are a more structured team under Ben Johnson than they were under Matt Eberflus. You could see the difference. Well, Caleb Williams may not have the greatest stat lines in the world. Hey, they're finding ways to win games under him. Easy schedule or not, you're still winning. And now this is where Coach Ed chimes in. 4 games this year, up by 10 or more points and lose the game. No mental fortitude, terrible coaching, a complete embarrassment for the storied franchise. Why Schoen didn't go is upsetting. And that ties into what I said earlier when I said, look, firing Brian Daboll does help, but it's not the only problem. Like I said, the Giants, and to Coach's point, you got to start all the way at the top and start rebuilding from the top down. That's usually how the biggest changes come, for better or for worse. Like you see the Carolina Panthers when David Tepper took over as the owner, his negative culture and his toxic culture as the owner trickled down to the rest of the team, and the Panthers have been a dumpster fire his entire time as their owner from 2018 onward. So that being one example. In this case, you're right, the Giants, they definitely, to Coach's point, you got to start from the top and rebuild that way. Because as long as you have GMs and owners that are just terrible, micromanaging, it's going to continue. Dysfunction permits this organization. And another perfect example, the Cleveland Browns. Why do you think the Browns are so horrible year after year after year? Because you got a terrible crook of an owner in Jimmy Haslam who just can't get out of his own way. That's why they've been awful for years. The Chicago Bears under the McCaskies have been a pretty poorly run organization. Although this year it looks like with Ben Johnson, they're starting to reach that turning point. But the Bears throughout a lot of years under the McCaskies have consistently hired the wrong coaches, made the wrong draft decisions. And it was a problem for years. The Raiders with Mark Davis. Unfortunately, Mark, he started to learn from his dad's later years, not his dad at his peak in the 70s and 80s. And unfortunately, Mark Davis learned from the senile, older version of Al Davis, not the Al Davis who helped the Raiders run roughshod. And you could look at so many organizations, and the Cowboys as well. It ultimately goes all the way to the top. And that's really the biggest problem for teams like the Giants, the Raiders, the Browns. You keep having the wrong people run the organization at the top. You're going to get a lot of the same results year after year. In the Giants case, whether it would be Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, Brian Daboll. If you are the wrong people calling the shots at the top, that can play a role in hiring the wrong coaches, poor player personnel decision. And it all trickles down come game time. So we can learn anything from these teams is the biggest problem for them isn't always the coach, even though it can be, it's usually at the top. And they said, look at the Jets. Their star, it's stripping it down to rebuild it right. But the Giants won't do the right thing. They just do the stupidest things, stupid as stupid it does. Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Coach for his insightful commentary in the chat on this one, because it certainly is a major factor with these teams. And then, speaking of the Cleats, so we'll say this. Shout out to the Chicago Bears. They finally found themselves Ben Johnson, who so far appears to be the right coach. We'll see if they stay on that track or not. But as of now, they're headed in a better direction. Giants their dysfunction is at a full time. And we got Chris B's, Jets fan. All right, you came in right at the right time, because now we're going to talk about the Jets and the Browns. Now, for starters, I'll say this. Their first game with, after the trade deadline, where they started moving on, letting guys like Quinion Williams, Sauce Gardner go, get some draft capital, try to start over from scratch. They won against the Browns, but leave it up to the Jets to remind you as to why they're in this position in the first place. They didn't even have 70 yards passing, and they still beat the Cleveland Browns. That's just saying more about the team you're playing than it is your own offense. I mean, you scored 27 points, but didn't even have 70 yards passing. It's like, how that happens is just, it's beyond. I'm looking around. You had 83 yards on the ground. You had only 54 total passing yards from Justin Fields. And you had, oh my gosh, what was it? Like, what? How did they score all these points? I need to know this. I need to know real quickly. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the scoring recap. Hold on a second. Here, give me one. Let's take a look at the scoring recap. See how the New York Jets managed to win with. How did they win this one? Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the score box. We're going to talk about this one real quick. Small steps, great distances. I believe that may have been a referral to the Jets, but hold on a second. Where's the all right, ESPN. I'll have to pull this up. All right, we'll go to ESPN for the box score. Give me 1 second, because I'm going to show you guys exactly how this happened. All right, let's take a look. We had share the screen with you guys. We're going to show this because this is just insane how this could happen. All right, let's see. First touchdown of the game. Kickoff return. Smith's kick 64 yards from Cleveland 35. Nongu 99-yard touchdown. That's the first one. So what did we get here? A punt. We got 7-7. Then what? We get a punt return here. So, yeah, it must have been punt return touchdown. Yep. So we got 2 special teams touchdowns from the Jets in the first half to score their first 14 points. So we give credit to the special teams in this one. Browns scored a touchdown. Then the Jets had an 11-play drive. They went down the field and got a field goal. All right. Fair enough. 17. And then they did get a touchdown on offense. See, 2-yard run, 4-yard run, 6-yard run, 5-yard, 3-yard, 3-yard, -7, 42-yard touchdown pass. Easily the best play in the passing game. Then we had a turnover on downs from the Browns, trying to go for it down the touchdown. Followed by a field goal from the Jets. Only 6 plays, 30-yard run, penalty, 6-yard run, loss, 10-yard run, field goal. Man, So, look, congratulations to the Jets on winning this, but even though stats don't always tell the full story, in this case, guys, point out the kickoff return, the punt return, the turnover on downs by the Browns, the one good pass by Fields was enough. And the Jets, I mean, they found a way to win. I'll give them that, but make no mistake about it, the Jets are still going to have to invest in their draft and free agency. Particularly, they're going to have to draft a quarterback for the future. Sure, it was enough to win this one, but this is just one game, folks. But hey, the win's a win for the Jets and for the Browns. I mean, it's just another day getting closer to the Tank Bowl. So, all right, that one is what it is. Now, moving along to a team that, oh boy, the Carolina Panthers. Dude, I had you guys, I mean, you had a winning record going into this one. You were 5-4. You were playing the dreadful Saints, who are in position to get a top 5 pick, if not the number 1 pick, based off the way their season's gone. And ultimately, guess what? They ended up losing to the Saints. You would think a Panthers team that beat the Cowboys, who are still a solid offensive team, who beat the Packers in an upset, you would think they'd have to beat the New Orleans Saints, but this is where the week gets a little bit bizarre, folks. We had some of the earlier games, like I said, kind of go as expected. The Bears and Colts winning, the Broncos winning, but this is where the week turned bizarre with the Saints beating a above 500 Panthers team. I mean, Rico Dowdle, man, I thought I was coming on here praising Rico Dowdle and I still am not, I'm not giving up on him just based on one game, but I was praising him for finally finding the right fit. And then I guess this particular game, it was jinxed. But like I said, it's only one game, but it's terrible for the Panthers because you're in a loaded NFC. You needed a win to go to 6-4 to at least have a shot at the wild card, which still is a long shot. Don't get me wrong, but at least a win could have even helped your chances. Now you're at 5-5. It's an even longer shot, especially being that they lost to the Saints. It's it's an uninspiring performance. I predicted the Panthers to beat the Saints. Unfortunately, game by game, week by week, how it goes, never know the way it's going to look, unfold, transpires, materializes in front of our eyes in football. It's the any given Sunday expression where you never know. There might be a crazy upset you're not expecting, and this was one of them. Now, in this one, Bryce Young had a pick. Rico Dowdle did have a touchdown, but he didn't go off at all in this one. I mean, the Panthers in this one had only a total of 175 yards. They got outgained 388 to 175 in the total yards department. So this was horrible. They were inefficient, 3 for 9 on third down. They went for it once on fourth down. They didn't convert. I mean, just all around terrible performance by the Panthers in this loss. It's not just the fact that you lost, but you lost with 10 points to a New Orleans Saints team that was 1-8. That's the big kicker for this Panthers team. That's why I wasn't sold on them despite their winning record. I considered it a lucky 5-4. Now you're at 5-5. So for the Saints, I mean, they get a win, but the Saints and Jets are still going to be contending for the number 1 pick. Let's make no mistake about it. So, congrats to the Saints. And wait, don't they play each other later this year? Oh, that's going to be a fun Tank Bowl. But I think I'm going to move along. Let's talk about some other games. This one actually was interesting because the Baltimore Ravens are now on a 3-game winning streak. They defeated the Minnesota Vikings 27-19 in this one. And now, I do want to start off to sell those people that are talking about J.J. McCarthy being like, see, the Vikings should have kept Sam Darnold. Look, I understand where that's coming from. You see what the Seahawks are doing. They're at 7-2. Darnold's their starter. I get it. But you got to remember something, too. The Vikings took a chance on J.J. McCarthy because they looked at Sam Darnold as, okay, he's a veteran. He's turned out to be a good fill-in for the season, but they feel like J.J. McCarthy has a more potential long-term ceiling being the younger quarterback. And remember, this is essentially his rookie season. Only his fourth start in the NFL. So he's essentially a rookie. You're essentially, the same mannerisms that apply to a rookie. You got to learn as you go along. You're going to make some mistakes as a rookie. You got to continue to learn and go as you go along. But the Vikings still saw more potential upside in J.J. McCarthy. They traded up to get this guy. They're not just going to give up on this guy after a rookie season where he didn't play, because he didn't play. So you obviously didn't have a sample size to see from to indicate whether or not he could potentially be the guy going forward. So you got to give this guy time, ultimately see what he can do. So we still got to wait and see. Let's just see what ultimately J.J. McCarthy can do. Now, he did have the win, remember, against the Detroit Lions. So we saw a solid performance there. So yes, he did throw 2 picks in this one against the Ravens, but you got to remember it's just one game. And to be fair, the Baltimore Ravens are starting to come back to form. They're healthy again. You got Lamar Jackson back. Derrick Henry had a solid game. Again, not the greatest stat line in the world, but 75 yards, 20 carries. That's still pretty solid, and that does make a difference. Lamar Jackson, he had 176-yard touchdown and 36 yards on the ground. It was good enough for them to find a way to win this game, and they scored 27 points. So ultimately, look, the Baltimore Ravens are getting their groove back with Lamar, and now they're 4-5. They still have a shot, especially with the Steelers taking a few losses lately. When it comes time for the Ravens and Steelers to play each other, if the Ravens can win out in those games, especially that you got the Bengals have a historically worse defense, all-time worst defense. The Browns are a dumpster fire. Steelers are starting to fall apart a little bit. Ravens are catching their groove, winning games. They could come back and still win this division despite that ugly 1-5 start. It's still possible. Now they've won 3 straight. They even beat the Vikings, who are not the best team, but they're a formidable foe. This was the toughest opponent they beat in that 3-game winning streak. And having Lamar back, being healthy, actually gives me confidence in this team. You had Zay Flowers was his lead receiver in this one. You still see DeAndre Hopkins from time to time can still be utilized in the passing game. We saw week 1 his touchdown against Buffalo. He can still, while he's not prime DeAndre Hopkins, he can still be an effective option in the passing game. And Baltimore, to their credit, they're starting to get it together now. And Lamar's back and healthy. Remember the last 2 seasons he was fully healthy. He had 23 in MVP, 24. It's still possible. And you and Eric, the Giants, 8-8, come back for the Super Bowl. I think maybe, are you referring to that 2011 season where they were kind of at the midpoint? But the Ravens at this point, I think it's possible. And credit to the Baltimore Ravens for winning this game. For Minnesota, unfortunately, they have the burden of being in the NFC North, where you got the Green Bay Packers, despite losing 2 straight, are still 5-3-1. The Bears are 6-3. Lions are fresh off another win against the Commanders. You're going to have out west, you have possibly either the Seahawks or Rams, whoever doesn't win that division, getting a wild card spot. So it's going to be tough for the Vikings. Maybe this year they don't get it together, but if you can still have a solid season and J.J. McCarthy improves, you at least have something to go with for the future here. I mean, it's just one game. He did throw 2 picks, but we'll give it time to see what he does to rebound. Now, here's the interesting game. What? I said going into it that this game right here would be the true test for the New England Patriots, going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And ultimately, the New England Patriots did what they had to do. Trayvon Henderson had himself his true breakout game. He had 2 long runs, 1 for a touchdown, and he played a key role in the Patriots' victory. Now you see why the Patriots went out their way to draft this guy to help their run game. Early on, he wasn't really having a lot of good performances, but now, recent weeks, we started to see him get better. He's starting to find his groove, starting to adjust to the NFL a little bit. And the New England Patriots, now Drake May's found his chemistry with Mike Vrabel. They've quietly creeped up to 8-2. And while they did have an easy schedule to start the season, that was actually a benefit to them. But a lot of times people like to talk, they think that cynical mindset, that hater mindset of, oh, you're only where you're at because you have an easy schedule. You only are 5-2 or 6-2 or 7-1 because you have an easy schedule. You had a last place schedule. But sometimes that quote unquote last place schedule can actually help out a team, because sometimes a team with fresh coach, fresh quarterback, they get those easy games to build their confidence up. They go out there, win those quote easy games. You get the players' confidence going. They start to find chemistry going. They build off of it. And then when it comes time for them to step up and play tougher teams, they take what they've been doing in the previous games and apply it. And that's what we're seeing here with the Patriots. And yes, at the time, a lot of those wins were easy wins against teams like the Dolphins, and the Browns and the Titans. But ultimately, it worked out in the long haul because those games worked perfectly, allowed the Patriots to build their confidence up, win those games. Drake May to get his chemistry going with the receivers. Trayvon Henderson to make his rookie mistakes, learn to adjust. Mike Vrabel to get the team used to his coaching style. It all worked out. And now here they go against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the top teams in the NFC, and they win this game on the road. They have an impressive win. Now, some people say, yeah, the Bucs were down some of their offensive linemen. Yes, that's true. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, injured or not, they're still a tough team to play. And ultimately, the fact that you went in there and won goes to show that the Patriots have come a long way. And the fact that they were able to go out there, slug it out with Tampa Bay, win in a game where Baker Mayfield still threw for 3 touchdowns, and Tampa Bay they were in this game the entire time. They didn't give up. But the fact that you had New England went out there. Mac Hollins was the lead receiver for them in this one. Stephon Diggs still was solid in this one. Trayvon Henderson had himself his true breakout game. They kept, and not to mention, shout out to the New England Patriots, they took advantage of those mismatches on Tampa's offensive line. They shut down Rashid White, to only 38 yards on the ground. So they did enough to win this game and make the key plays. Plus, they held the Bucs to only 5 conversions on 13 third down attempts and shut them down their only 4th down. So that plays a huge difference too. It's usually those third down conversions a lot of people don't see. So shout out to the Patriots, because now they're one of their class of the AFC. We might even see a Patriots-Colts rivalry resurrection coming around the corner with different faces. Maybe, but time will tell on that one. And the good news is for New England, their division rival, the Buffalo Bills, lost to the Miami Dolphins. The least expected game, man. But the Dolphins beat them 30-13. Look, I get it. Teams, sometimes teams lose games they should win. But for the Buffalo Bills, you needed a win. You should have won this game against the Miami Dolphins to keep pace. But to lose 30-13, the Bills aren't down and out, but as far as keeping pace with the rest of the AFC goes, this is not a confidence-inspiring performance by the Buffalo Bills. And don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away from the Dolphins, because even with Tua's struggles this season, even with the Dolphins' struggles as a team, we know Tua Tagovailoa is a talented quarterback. And in this game, we saw it. And we just, And we saw several takeaways, too, that played a role in this one. And the Miami Dolphins now get the win in this one. I got to give them credit, man. See, they got several takeaways. They got, they got 2 fumbles and an interception. So they got 3 turnovers. That helped them out in this one big time. So that's a good one right there. And plus, they ran the ball for nearly 200 yards. That's a big difference maker, too. We haven't seen a lot of it from the Dolphins, but Davon Aintree had himself a really good game in this one. 174 yards on the ground. Tua had 2 touchdowns. He did have 2 picks, but 2 touchdowns. Waddle looked really good in this one. And Miami Dolphins found a way to win, so I'll give them props on that. But for the Buffalo Bills, they got to go back to the drawing board and figure something out, man. I feel like they're becoming a little too reliant on Josh Allen at this point. They need to find a little bit more. And you got to wonder, this may seem a little bit ridiculous, but got to wonder about Sean McDermott. Is he really the best coach in the long haul? I mean, considering you're used to losing in the playoffs to Kansas City, and this year they've had a few games they probably should have won. You got to wonder, are we going to start having that conversation soon? Maybe not now, but it's something to consider. But for the other Florida team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, here was the thing. It's the way they lost this game. You're playing a Houston Texans team down C.J. Stroud, having to go with Davis Mills, who you remember from his time, Davis Mills, the Bill Burr lookalike, before C.J. Stroud. Those 2 seasons, you had Deshaun Watson. They had no real quarterback when the whole Deshaun Watson, first the suspension, then the trade to the Browns. They didn't really have anyone. And Davis Mills was filling in, and you're like, yeah, they need a real quarterback. That Davis Mills had to fill in through 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. Mind you, the Jaguars were up 29-10 entering the 4th. They took their foot off the gas pedal. Houston scored 26 unanswered and won this game. And look, I'm not necessarily, credit to the Texans. They won. They're 4-5, but Jacksonville, man, you got to close these games. Especially they went into this 5-3. While 5-3, they needed a win to keep pace in a loaded playoff race. And they ultimately let their foot off the gas pedal. They couldn't complete it. They couldn't complete the game. They ran out of gas and ultimately lost. That says more about the team. I think this one mainly falls on the defense. I've sometimes given Trevor Lawrence flack, said I think he's a bit overrated. He's more of a game manager than a real franchise quarterback. But in this one, I'm blaming it more on the defense. Even though the Jaguars' offense failed to score more points, when you give up 26 unanswered, that's mainly falling on your defense in this one. Just a poor performance by the Jaguars. And this is why I'm not sold on them. Because they were 4-2 at one point. They've lost 3 of their last 4, including a blowout loss to the Rams, who are one of the top teams in the NFC, and an embarrassing 4th quarter collapse. This was like the 2020 Steelers in December, the 2023 Eagles in December collapse. So shame on the Jaguars for that. We'll see what they do to adjust. But you got to play better in the 4th quarter. But before we get to the 4 o'clock games, take a quick break, grab a sip of water. Stay tuned. Your boy will be right back. We'll go through the 4 o'clock games. Then we'll talk a little bit about the NBA. Like I said, this is going to be a loaded show, so take a quick break. Be right back. And I'm back, folks, after a couple minutes to recharge and regroup. Now we're back. We're going to talk about the 4 o'clock games now. We're going to talk about them, talk a little bit about the primetime games. Then I'm going to wrap this thing up and then talk about the NBA for a little bit. So without any further ado, let's get right back to it. We're going to start off with the 4 o'clock games. And remember what I said at the beginning of the show. Ironically, we had 2 games during that time slot with a 44-22 final score. So let's just dive right into the games. We had that score. We had first the Seattle Seahawks staying in control out west in the NFC, defeating their division rival Arizona Cardinals 44-22, completing the sweep for the season. This time around, be it in more impressive fashion. Last time was on a walk-off game winner. This time it's a blowout. Now, in this game right here, I remember I alluded to earlier about my rant of the week that the quarterback isn't always the MVP. Now, in this case, I said Sam Darnold does have a potential case, but this performance, despite the final score, didn't really show it. Now, Sam Darnold, to his credit, has been having a good season. He's found chemistry with his receivers, and they're starting to look good. But in this game, there was an interception thrown and a couple lost fumbles. There was a lost fumble despite the win. So while Sam Darnold, didn't play, he didn't play great in this one. He didn't exactly have his best game. You mostly had with Zach Charbonnet had a touchdown at the running game. You had him. Kenneth Walker had a pretty good performance, accommodating for well over 100 all-purpose yards, rushing the ball. You had Jackson Smith did have a touchdown catch, but it wasn't just that as well. Most of Seattle's offense came in the first half. And in this one, but Sam Darnold didn't have his best game in the world. You had Jacoby Brissett sack fumble, not to mention DeMarcus Lawrence played a key role in this one. DeMarcus Lawrence had 2 fumble recoveries, 4 touchdowns in this one, and that played a factor in the outcome of this game, folks. So I got to really give credit to DeMarcus Lawrence, who was the real MVP for this game. So it's in situations like this is why I'm not necessarily sold on Sam Darnold being an MVP frontrunner. Well, he's had a good season. He did have a few turnovers in this one. He even had a few turnovers, I remember, a couple weeks back on the Monday night game. So, while he's had a good season, the Seahawks are a really good team on both sides of the ball. It's games like this that don't have me sold on Darnold being necessarily the MVP is what I'm saying. But credit to the Seahawks. They have a really good team. They beat up on a battered Cardinals team. DeMarcus Lawrence had a really good game for this one. He's proved to be a great addition for that Seahawks defense. Like I said, the perfect blend of younger and older players on this team. You just have you've got a really good unit over there with Seattle's defense. And we've seen them consistently all season. So I'm going to give credit to the Seattle Seahawks in this one here. Like I said, DeMarcus Lawrence in this game was the star for them, scoring 2 touchdowns. But you also had Trace Knight as well. Have a really good all-around defense. You got, even in this game, the Seahawks had 5 sacks without Julian Love, Josh Jobe, Ernest Jones IV, and Jaron Reed. But the Seahawks found a way to win this game. DeMarcus Lawrence stepped up big. So credit to him for finding a way to do that. And the Seahawks are 7-2, and they're in really good position. In a loaded NFC. And speaking of loaded NFC, another similar game. You had the Detroit Lions beating up on the Washington Commanders. Detroit Lions Commanders are down Jaden Daniels. He's out, and Detroit Lions took advantage of it, did take care of business, and got the win in this one. You also had, and I got to say, sometimes you got Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs, folks, we got to talk about him a little bit more. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL currently, 142 yards on the ground. Excellent performance. Not to mention Jameson Williams had 6 receptions, 119 yards. The Detroit Lions did what they do best. They capitalized with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery just dominating on the ground. Let's not forget, as awesome as Gibbs is, David Montgomery is an excellent number 2 back. And that Dan Campbell knows how. He's got the right 2 backs. You can alternate carries between them, and you can get good performances from both, and that's what they did here. And that makes Jared Goff's job a lot easier, where he can get the ball off to Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. They can go out And the Detroit Lions can just dominate like they did here with 44 points against the Washington Commanders. Another excellent performance by the Detroit Lions. They're now 6-3. They get to put that Vikings loss behind them. And we'll see what they can do. We know what the Detroit Lions are. They become one of the top teams in the NFC, but the key question for them will be come playoff time. But in this case, Lions took care of business per usual. Excellent for them. And another team, ironically, speaking of Jared Goff, his former team, the Los Angeles Rams, put a whooping on the San Francisco 49ers. I told you it was only a matter of time before those injuries finally caught up to them. They're down Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Eventually, that was going to be a problem. Eventually. And this game against that dominant Rams offense, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, still a good number 2. Matt Stafford having an excellent season. Even getting near the end of his career. The Rams are just absolutely lights out, dominating this season. Now, you see, this is what actually happens when you can have a healthy Matthew Stafford with the right players around him. We saw it the Super Bowl year. The Rams did a really good job when Stafford was healthy, and he was good enough to help lead them to that Super Bowl win with the right talent around him. A Pete Cooper Cup, OBJ coming in. He still had Aaron Donald wrecking havoc on defense, Jalen Ramsey. But now here you are, we flash forward to 2025, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. You got healthy Matthew Stafford. You got Puka Nacua, who's broke out and become his own guy, become a star. You also have Devontae Adams still doing his thing, and you see what happens with this team actually being healthy. They're 7-2. One of their losses being to my team, the defending Super Bowl champion, but it was just one of those games where the Rams did their thing. Stafford threw 4 touchdowns. Kyron Williams as well. Don't forget him. He's been helping out big time on the ground, 73 yards. And they kept this 49ers offense in check throughout this one. Yeah, the 49ers did score some points in garbage time, 12 points in garbage time after only scoring 14 in the second and third, but you can tell the Rams just dominated this game. This is what happens when you have a healthy team. But on the flip side, got to be a homer here. The fact the Eagles already beat the Rams and then beat the Packers yesterday and beat the Buccaneers, it makes me all the more confident in my team. But credit then to the Rams. And they got no penalties too, which is a fun stat. It don't always happen, but sometimes you get those games with no penalties and it works out in your favor. But I tell you, the Rams have retooled them. I think they're a dark horse contender right now. Because you remember even last year in the playoffs, remember against the Eagles in the snow? The Rams ended up being the Eagles' toughest test on the road to the Super Bowl. Mind you, the team that's used to playing in a dome came to Philly in the snow and gave us a fight and nearly beat us. That's why I consider the Rams potential contenders again. You have even Jared Verse. You remember last year he had himself a really good season. You still got some decent pieces on that defense too. Quinyon Lake. You got Nathan Landman. They got some, not the greatest defense in the league, but they have a solid enough core. And they've been a pretty solid defense too. I got to give them props. And this was a really good day for LA teams because the Los Angeles Superchargers, not as catchy as San Diego Superchargers. I tried, though. The Los Angeles Chargers took care of business, defeating the Pittsburgh Steelers 25-10. And we thought they were going to have a rough day down their offensive line, but nope. The Chargers did not let that happen. Particularly the second half, the Chargers just blew the brakes off them. They were up 11. They were already up in the first half, 11-3, but then second half, they blew the brakes off them, particularly the fourth quarter, scoring 25 points in that fourth. They scored 25 total points, 10 in the fourth. They balled out. And they absolutely, they came up big. You had Vidal came up again strong, near 100 yards, even with a battered offensive line. The defense forced 2 turnovers on Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers looking washed up again. And not to mention Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen made some history, folks. So now I think he broke a record. Keenan Allen broke the record, become the all-time Chargers leader in receptions for that team. So congratulations to Keenan Allen. It was cool you had Antonio Gates in the building to come along, show his support for him. So credit to them. Congrats to the Chargers on a big win. And even though the Broncos had the division lead, I feel like the Chargers so far are looking like the more impressive team. And remember, they've already beaten the Broncos head-to-head. If the Chargers can keep this momentum up, they could possibly beat the Broncos in a rematch. But then again, I don't know. That's going to be a tough one considering how awesome that Denver Broncos team is. I mean, the tough part is going to be going against that defense, though. So we'll see about that one. But the Chargers could win out. Maybe as the season goes along, the Broncos take a few L's. Especially if their offense has a few more poor performances like that. But, man. But congratulations to the Chargers. They're having themselves a really good season. And Jim Harbaugh, man, I'll tell you, he's got to be the best. He's the best head coach in terms of getting production out of his run game. Because here's a guy down his third-string running back, a no-name guy we never heard of before. And now everyone's talking about him. Even though he doesn't have the easiest name in the world to pronounce, here's a guy who, mind you, was a third stringer, 2 running backs on IR, Omarion Hampton, and what's his name? Najee Harris. We're both down IR. Here comes the third-string running back leading the way for this Chargers team. Even with a battered offensive line, that goes to show you Jim Harbaugh knows how to make the best of his running backs. So he may not have the best running back in the league. The fact that he's doing this with a third-string back, getting him to have good games consistently, several near 100 or plus 100-yard games, that goes to show you right there that it's Jim Harbaugh doing something to help this team. So shout out to the Chargers. Shout out to Jim Harbaugh for turning this team around, because now, here you go, Chargers are 7-3, and they're keeping pace in that AFC. Maybe even potentially, if they just win out, they could win out that division. We will see on that, but so far, excellent job there by the Los Angeles Chargers. And then to close it out with the football side of it, we're going to go close it out with my team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Take care of business, defeating the Green Bay Packers 10-7. Now, the difference between the Thursday night to start the week and the Monday night to close, the score was the same, the 10-7 for the winning team, but in this case, this was more of a good defensive game. We saw, because remember, to be fair, you had the opening drive, the Eagles moved down the field, they were in the red zone, and the Packers forced a fumble and ended that drive with no points for the Eagles. The Eagles remember the Packers' first drive, Josh Jacobs was dominating on the ground. And it looked like they were going to march down the field, score a touchdown, but then we got a big sack, derailed them back, put them on a 3rd and long, and they were forced to pass again. And this pass rush, we were having a field day. Field day. Maybe forcing Jordan Love to throw the ball. He was throwing the ball. He was trying to hit his receivers, but our secondary looked much better than we had in past weeks. We did a really good job in this one, shutting down the Packers' offense. I mean, Josh Jacobs had a good game for them, and I'll give Jacobs credit. But ultimately, when it mattered most, on the plays that mattered most, ultimately, we shut him down. We did what we needed to. We kept him to only 7 for 16. And we got 5 sacks, which really helped out too. And 2 fumbles as well. So the 5 sacks and the 2 turnovers made a huge difference. Oh, yeah, so credit to the Eagles defense for stepping up when needed to, but also credit to the Packers too, because I got to give them props. They did play a good game on defense. They kept us to only 10 points, even with Saquon, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown playing. They kept A.J. Brown to an absolute minimum in this one. They did. So I got to give that Packers defense credit. I got to give some props to them. They did a really good job keeping us to only 10 points. And honestly, even though his stat line wasn't that great, Saquon Barkley played a key role in this offense. He only had 60 yards on the ground, but he did also have 41 in the passing game, and he played a key role in us moving the ball, particularly on one of those final drives where we ran out the clock. And unfortunately, we did have that. We tried to go for it on 4th down because we weren't in position to kick a field goal, but not in a good punt position. And ultimately, we gave the Packers the ball in halfway decent field position, but we shut them down on a 4th down. We got a fumble, got the ball back. And we tried to get the 1st down. We couldn't because the Packers still had 2 timeouts. They used it, but then we forced the Packers to kick a long field goal for Brandon McManus in unfavorable kicking conditions. And we got a piece of the ball, forced this wild miss that flung to the left, not even close to the upright. Didn't even touch the red zone. That's how much of a wild miss it was. But that's in part because we got a hand on it. So I got to give credit. And Jalen Phillips, I said that some people thought he might be eased into it, but he came from Miami. He's familiar with Vic Fangio, who was the defensive coordinator in Miami in 2023. And now here he comes to Philly, having an idea of who he's being coached by. He came in and made an impact immediately. He had 6 tackles in this one. Right, and did he have a sack too? Oh, no. He had combined 6 tackles in this one. You had Jalix Hunt was doing pretty good at 5 tackles, a sack. Nakobe Dean, 7 tackles, a sack. One of his better games. So this Eagles defense did a really good job. So they did an excellent job here in this one. So they took care of business and did what they needed to. The defense was good, but so was the Packers defense. So all around, this was a good defensive game. Credit to both defenses. Now, did the weather play a role in it? It played a factor, yes, but ultimately, though, you still got to give credit where credit's due to the 2 defenses. But good win for the Eagles, now 7-2, tied with the Seahawks. And now, next week, Eagles-Lions, Sunday Night Football. Let's get it on, baby. Looking forward to that one. Then we're going to wrap this thing out, kind of go quick. Week 10, biggest winners for Week 10. I got my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, being able to win that tough defensive battle on the road. Got to go with the Chargers, who won despite being short their offensive line against a tough Steelers team. I got to consider them winners. And, of course, the Patriots winning their toughest test of the season. This was kind of the trap game of let's see how far you've really come. They took care of business, beat a formidable team in the Bucs. Give them props. Losers of this week. Maybe beating a dead horse, but the Giants. You lost the winnable game, and ultimately your coach got fired. You blew a 4th quarter lead over the 4th time this season. Big loss there. Also, speaking of 4th quarter blown leads, the Jaguars, like I said, giving up 26 unanswered to a struggling team down their starter. That's an embarrassing loss when you needed a win to keep pace. And then the Carolina Panthers, you lost to the Saints in a game that the Panthers needed. Like I said, their playoff shots were kind of low before this game, but this did not help at all. Now they're at 5-5 in a tougher playoff race. Not any help at all, considering they lost to a team that had 1 win going into it. So that's that for the NFL portion. Now, I'm going to close this thing out. Quickly talk about the NBA. Start with the breaking news. The Dallas Mavericks fired their general manager, Nico Harrison. The news broke this morning as I was logging on my computer around 11:30 to get ready for this bad boy. I found out that indeed the Dallas Mavericks parted ways with Nico Harrison. And we had been talking about it. It had been going on for days. They were talking about it. But ultimately, it finally happened. The Dallas Mavericks parted ways with Nico Harrison. I uploaded a YouTube short on my channel explaining how bad it had been. This was a Dallas Mavericks team who just a few years ago were in the NBA Finals. They fell short against the Boston Celtics, losing in 5, but they were in the NBA Finals. Luka Doncic led them to a Finals. Luka and Kyrie, we thought they had something going there. Great 1-2 backcourt. They were, during their time playing together, particularly that last season and a half before the Luka trade, they were the best backcourt in the NBA currently. They were the best during that season. They made it to the finals, and it looked like everything was really going smooth for them. And then they ultimately traded away Luka Doncic in the middle of the night, literally in the middle of the night, to the Los Angeles Lakers without putting him on the trade market, where they could have gotten some picks in return. And here's the thing. I'm pulling this up for my YouTube short. The Mavs don't have their first-round pick until 2031. This upcoming year, they traded to Charlotte to get P.J. Washington. 2028. That was a pick swap for Daniel Gafford. They don't have their 2029 first-round pick. That was in the Kyrie trade with the Nets when they acquired Kyrie. In 2030, they swapped with San Antonio. So that's one area. Nico Harrison traded away the superstar player in his mid-20s without getting pick compensation for a team that gave up a bunch of picks to go all in for a finals run, only to trade away the superstar of the finals run less than a season later and not get a haul picks in return. Now, maybe there was some front office conflict. Maybe Luka really wanted to go to the Lakers. I do have some speculation that that's maybe the team Doncic really wanted to play for, because even through his IG account, there was a picture of his first time he visited America back as a teenager. His family went to a Lakers game. And he, early on in his career, when he got drafted in 2018 till the unfortunate helicopter crash, Kobe Bryant was one of his mentors, despite the fact that Luka played on the Dallas Mavericks. So maybe there is some speculation that Luka quietly tried to force his way out because maybe the Lakers were the team he really wanted to go to the entire time. Maybe. But even if that were the case, if Nico Harrison should have gotten a haul of picks in return to help rebuild, especially that you don't have a bunch of future picks that I just indicated till 2031. All you had was your first round pick in the 2025 draft. You got lucky. You were handed the number 1 pick through the lottery. You got Cooper Flagg, but it's going to take more than just Cooper Flagg, because you got Kyrie's out for a while. Anthony Davis, you never know when he might get injured. Anthony Davis can, when he's on the court and he's healthy, could still be a dynamic player, but he's not always available. And outside of a healthy Anthony Davis and a young Cooper Flagg who is still learning, it's still his first couple weeks of his NBA career. He's going to need a full season to learn and grow as a player. And how do you not get future picks to make sure he was something for the future? Because you don't know with Anthony Davis. That's part of the reason the Lakers gave up Anthony Davis, because they know about his injury history. They know he could go down at any point, and they felt like, hey, in order to make this trade, we got to give Dallas something. And Dallas took Anthony Davis, but they really needed future assets, and they didn't get it. So ultimately, this was a well-deserved firing. If you're the Dallas Mavericks, you talk about destroying a championship contending team. I mean, this is not how you trade away your star player. If you want an example of how to properly do it, Go back to when the Lakers acquired Pau Gasol from the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies got a haul of futures, and they did help build a championship contender in the early 2010s. That grit and grind team, Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol, Tony Allen. They never got a championship run. They at least they did get a few conference finals runs. They had an upset over the Spurs, but that's how, if you're going to trade your star player, you do it right. You get some future assets. The Mavericks didn't do that. And ultimately, a deserved firing. Now, to close this thing out about the NBA, being that it's the early regular season, you're going to notice a trend. We're not going to talk a whole lot about it, except something to talk about. Victor Wembanyama has been going out having an amazing season. He's been going out there playing spectacularly. He's out there putting up a potential MVP case. He's hitting threes. He's making blocks. The Spurs are starting to catch their groove as a team. We already saw years 1 and 2. Wemby as a player was doing his thing, but now Victor Wembanyama, not only is he hitting his mark as a player, on top of that, look, dude is balling out. The team's balling out. Now they're finally getting some pieces. They got Dylan Harper in the draft. They got De'Aaron Fox last year from the Spurs, or from the Kings, excuse me. And now they're finally finding their groove as a team. Even the Atlanta Hawks, they've won a few games lately. They did beat the Clippers, but they upset the Lakers on Saturday. They're now 6-5. I'll keep an eye on the Hawks to see if they keep that momentum going. But the Spurs are now 8-2. They're fresh off a win against the Bulls. Wembanyama had 38 last night. Had a really good outing. It's now starting to click for them as a team. But for a lot of these early teams, like the Spurs, that are off to a hot start, it's awesome. They're off to an awesome start. Don't get me wrong. But also you got to remember, it's still early in the regular season. There's plenty of time anything could happen. Luka's going out, having a really good start to the season. Got the Lakers at 8-3. And plus now Luka Doncic's in good shape too. And you got Najee Marshall's a great addition and cut. I mean, this is just, it's amazing that Luka Doncic, first off, he was already a really good player, but now here he is. He's actually in shape. And Najee Marshall, he's been solid for the Mavs, but as a team, though, they still got some more work to do as a team, though, because they're not winning a lot of games right now. Now, maybe Najee's a guy you could keep for the future, but you still got to get it together as a team. Make sure you put the right pieces there in place. And you got David stopping by in the chat. What's up, David? So for the NBA, I'll keep in touch with what's going on. Remember, it is early in the season. You got some of your projected guys like Jokic going out, having a good early start to the season. Giannis doing his best to carry the Bucks. They're at 7-4 without a real number 2 guy. So Giannis has been having a really good season so far. But ultimately, man, like I say, NBA is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're going to have to really wait and see. It's really going to start to pick up around Super Bowl time when you get the trade deadline, the All-Star break. That's when the NBA is really going to pick up. March heading into April. And that's when we'll sometimes see how the real season's going to pick up. Perfect example would be the 2022-23 Lakers. They got rid of Russ. They got some younger players like Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and they made a run to the conference finals with them. They did a big turnaround. The Warriors last year with Jimmy Butler, they got Butler around the trade deadline. They made a turnaround, made a run to the playoffs last year. So sometimes you never know. For some teams, they might get hot right around the trade deadline and do a 180 on their season. So what we're seeing now, maybe it might keep up, maybe it might not. But NBA is a marathon, not a sprint. As some of the favorites, I'm going to stick with who I had going into the season, being that it's early on. That being out west, I could see teams like the Nuggets, obviously the OKC Thunder as some of the favorites. Spurs, I think, could finally get in. They could make a run to the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to necessarily contend, but they could at least make a playoff run this year. That'd be the first playoff appearance with Wemby, a big step in the right direction. But contenders in the East, I'm leaning toward the Knicks and Cavs being some of the favorites. Maybe if the Pacers get healthy later in the season, they could make a run, kind of like they did last year, but those are some of the potential early favorites. That could change as we go along. But that's all we got for you for this show, man. It was another loaded 3-point blitz. Thanks to Eric, Mitch, Chris B, and everyone that joined me in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have time to catch me later, I'll be exclusively on the Hardcore Sports Network doing pick'ems at 8 p.m. with Agent Warrior X. We'll be going through Week 10 briefly and talk about some of the Week 11 matchups. You can catch that later tonight. That's the top picture right behind on the door for the pick'ems later tonight. So to everyone that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. If I don't see you again, have a great rest of your day. Until next time, it's your boy Nicky Stees signing off. Have a great Veterans Day and peace.